Good evening. My name is Lori Gaskin, and I'm Chair of the Creeks Restoration and Water Quality Improvement Citizens Advisory Committee. This is our regular meeting of Wednesday, December 16th, and we are beginning at 5:33 p.m. And I am calling the meeting to order, and I would ask that we conduct a roll call of committee members, please.
Good evening. Let's call Chair Gaskin.
Present.
And Ms. Weber.
Present.
Ms. Owens.
Present.
Ms. Rizzo Centino. Ms. Silva. And Mr. Moldaver. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We next have approval of minutes from October 21, 2020. And is there a motion or just consensus that we approve these minutes from Penny Betsy? Are you approving of these minutes?
I am. This is Penny.
Penny and Betsy?
I was
Okay.
absent.
Yes. Oh, you were absent.
Yes.
I think we may have to then defer, Cameron, or how do you want to handle the minutes?
Madam Chair, maybe when Ms. Rizzo Centino arrives, we can bring that up. So maybe between the two business items.
Okay. All right.
Thank
Just maybe remind me. Thank you. And Cameron, are there any agenda adjustments?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So this is our time for public comment, and I would turn and ask staff if we have any public comment in the queue.
So I'll go ahead and just ask, we do have one attendee. Mr. Holmgren, if you wanted to make a public comment, if you could go ahead and just raise your hand to indicate that. And this would be on any item that is not on our agenda. I don't see an indication for a public comment.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
And-
if I could take just a minute, I'd like to make a public comment.
Sure.
I wanted to recognize and thank all of the members of our Creeks Advisory Committee. It's the end of the year. It's been a crazy year. And just for anybody from the public that watches these meetings, all of the Creeks Advisory Committee members are volunteers. They're using their precious, valuable time to come and participate and learn about and understand and make recommendations to the Creeks Division, and their experience and insight are very much appreciated by the Creeks Division staff and by the city. And so I just wanted to thank all of you on behalf of myself and the Creeks Division staff and the Parks and Recreation Department and the City of Santa Barbara for your service to the city, and to wish you guys happy holidays and thank you for your service.
Well, thank you so much. I hope I speak for those who are absent and for Penny and Betsy when I say that I think we all feel this is an honor, and we feel privileged to be able to serve the city in this capacity. And you're doing such noble work that it's just a joy. Penny, Betsy, any comments?
I'll echo your comments, Lori. It's an honor to serve and help support the great work that the Creeks Division is doing.
Thank you.
I'm wondering, Jennifer, I got a note, actually an email from Mark. He doesn't know where the hand raise is. We're all accustomed to Zoom. Where, for the public, where is the hand raise function?
Let's see, it should give
I'm
them
looking
that
for it.
option. Unfortunately, I'm not in the same view.
I know. What about a question? Like if they wrote under chat or something, or question?
Let's see, probably question.
Okay. So
Could
to our
work.
our listeners, because we have a different interface, if you could maybe indicate that you have comment to make on an item not on the agenda. You can comment when we get to an agenda item, but if it's an item not on the agenda, you can just type in, I have a comment, and then we'll acknowledge you. So will that work, Jennifer? Is that?
Yeah, I just was checking to make sure it is set up so that attendees can raise hands. So you can use that option also if you.
Okay. But
can't
do you know
raise
where
your
to
hand,
direct them
but-
to? I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
not sure. Well, anyway, if you
So-
can find the
Yeah,
chat,
either the raise hand or the questions.
okay, raised hand or questions. So if you can search the directional areas, hopefully it's there. Okay.
Ms. Hollywood, can you tell us, so where do you ask the question? What does he need to do to be able to ask the question?
There should be a drop down labeled as questions. And it looks like a chat box, and you should just be able to click in there and type your question.
Okay.
I don't see that.
He's saying, yeah, there is neither a raise hand or a question option. Okay.
Let me-
So
hang on
to our attendees via Zoom, we're working on this function for the public right now. So I'm just going to pause for a moment. I guess we've never had someone who has wanted to, make a comment. I'm not sure.
Madam Chair, since you're able to communicate with Mr.
Yes.
Holmgren,
Yes.
do you know whether he has a comment, public comment, or if he's going to make a comment on one of the agenda item.
Okay.
I found something here, so I'm gonna go ahead and bring it over to the screen that's sharing. So you should have a dashboard on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And there should be a raise hand.
Excellent.
icon
Okay,
in there.
so if you could hold that up for 1 sec, and our attendees over virtually. So there is a dashboard and there should be a raised hand. And he is indicating to me that we can proceed. He doesn't have a question on public comment or a comment on public comment. And he's saying no raised hand. Okay. Well, maybe offline we can practice where one of us is an attendee and we can make sure we see it. But in the interim, at least the one public member has the ability to communicate with me, and then I can communicate. So, all right.
I'll keep
So
working
no.
on it and I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we have to enable it some way. I'm not sure. So no other public comments other than Cameron's very lovely one. Thank you very much. And committee members and staff communications, I turn to Penny and Betsy. Any committee member communications you would like to make?
No, thank you. Not at this time, thanks.
Thank you. And any other staff? Okay.
No, Madam Chair.
Great. Thank you. Then we'll move to business items. We have two. And the first is our fiscal year 2020 Water Quality Research and Monitoring Program summary, which we look forward to hearing every year. And Jill Murray, welcome, Water Quality Research Coordinator.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the rest of the committee. Okay, yes, I come twice a year and give you updates about the research and monitoring program. And you can go ahead, Jen, advance. And Jen, can you do next slide? Oh, yeah. So I start, usually in December, I give a summary of the water quality, and then in June, present the research plan for the coming year. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I'm not seeing the slides advance, are you?
Yes, yes, we are. Well, no,
Okay.
we aren't. No, we aren't. That's still on the,
The
I
title slide.
apologize. Sorry.
Okay, that's
Sorry.
okay.
George Johnson was calling me. So
Okay.
just let me know when you need to advance.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'll start by just giving a quick summary of the COVID impacts to our sampling and research, and then I'll go through a few items of interest. The two that I'll spend the most time on are the pesticide monitoring and microplastics, and then I'll finish with next steps. Go ahead, next slide, please. Okay, so the sampling that I'm discussing is based on the FY20 research plan, which the committee approved in June 2019. And we were able to carry out most of the plan. COVID did have some impacts and continues to have some impacts. We have some reduced sampling due to shared workspaces and shared vehicles and some staff limitations. In particular, I was assisting the county with data management for a couple of months earlier in the spring. And Chris Clark, who does a lot of the sample collection, has had to focus on encampments as they've been a potential threat to water quality and needed to be addressed. The watershed stewards that we have really assisted us. They always do, but in particular this year, it's been very helpful because they continue to conduct our weekly sampling, and they always work in a pair, and so they're a bubble, and they are able to be in close contact together while they're out in the field sampling, which is important for safety to have a pair. We have a small contract with UCSB on some microbial source tracking work, and that was a little bit delayed because they weren't able to get in their labs, but that has since been put back on track. And COVID has some potential water quality impacts because of the larger encampments than we've seen in the past, as very close to the creek and on the banks. There's the potential for human waste and trash to get into the creek, especially during the rains as it washes off. A lot of the biggest encampments have been cleaned recently, and luckily they were cleaned before any of the rains this year. And so hopefully most of that potential impact has been assuaged by the cleanups. And because we didn't come to the CAC in June 2020, because there were no meetings at that time, we didn't make any changes to the research plan. We just rolled over the same plan, although we did recently add the topic of microplastics, which I'll discuss more. We added that mid-year. Next slide, please. Okay, so some pesticide monitoring results I'll share with you. Last year, we added some, or I would say we reinstituted some glyphosate testing. Glyphosate is an herbicide that has been in the news a lot, especially in relation to a lawsuit that was against its manufacturer, the Roundup. It's the main ingredient in Roundup. And so there was a lawsuit that was filed about potential impacts of that herbicide. And because of that, we resumed testing. We had tested in the early years of the Creeks Division and found very few detections of glyphosate. But as we said at that time, and not just in relation to glyphosate, but in relation to other pesticides, sometimes the levels of detection are above the levels of concern or the level or the toxicity thresholds. And sometimes the toxicity thresholds decrease over time. So we wanted to go back out and test for glyphosate again. And we did that in dry weather and wet weather. And we also did continued to really chip away at our understanding of our problem with neonicotinoid pesticides and fipronil. We know that they're in our creeks all the time during wet weather, and we've talked a lot about this, but we're continuing to add more samples every year to try to understand where they're coming from, how they're getting into our creeks. And also, we have found that we've had some potential ecological impacts that may be due to these pesticides being present. We found these impacts even at our reference sites, so higher in the watersheds, which doesn't, which is confusing. How are we having these impacts if most of the pesticides are being used in the urban areas? So for the dry weather sampling for the glyphosate, we tested local creeks and sediment. And then this first flush in November 2019, we sampled several sites on the receding end of that storm. And so you can see the rain graph and the arrow points to that. We sampled during the second half of that early rainfall. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I'm not going to go into the details of the table. I just thought it would be interesting to show you how we look at these results. We ask a lab to test for a suite of compounds. We asked for fipronil, glyphosate, their degradates, and a suite of neonics. And to tell you the truth, I don't always know what we're going to get back with the neonics because there are new pesticides constantly added, and our lab is really good, and they stay abreast of that and add more tests as time goes on. So the first question when we get a suite of data back like this is we ask if the results make sense. And the reason is because sometimes we find things that don't make sense. We found one pesticide, dichlorin, we found it everywhere. And when I went to explore what is that pesticide, it's not used. Like I know that is a laboratory mistake or some kind of confusion, even though the lab and I have not been able to elucidate what it is about. But everything in this suite made sense. The pesticides we expected to see, we saw higher concentrations lower in the watersheds. Then we ask which pesticides are most prevalent. And this table has all the pesticides going down and our sites going across. And we sampled Laguna Channel, Sycamore Creek, and then in Mission Creek, we sampled 3 locations: Rattlesnake Creek, which is higher in the watershed. That's one we consider a reference site, Rocky Nook Park, and Mission Creek at Montecito Street, so very close to the train station. It's what we call our integrator site. It integrates the entire watershed for Mission Creek. And then as part of our our project assessment for the planter boxes that are installed at city buildings, we sampled roof runoff. And the pesticides, so looking across this table, which pesticides go, which pesticides do we see at almost every site? It's imidacloprid and the degradation products of imidacloprid, and it's glyphosate. And then we see fipronil at a lot of, at all of the creek sites, but none of our roof runoff sites. So I didn't learn any, there are some spot results from some other neonic pesticides, but there was nothing, there was nothing new except for this one. It's called piperonyl butoxide. I didn't know what that was. It turns out it's a, it's not a surfactant, but it's something like a surfactant that's added to pesticides, and it has a very low toxicity itself. Okay, and so then we ask, are the concentrations concerning? We know we're seeing it everywhere, but at what levels? Next slide, please. And so in this table, it's all the same numbers, but I've just highlighted the results, and I don't expect you to look at the details. I've highlighted the results that are above our known ecotoxicity benchmarks. And so yellow means they're above official benchmarks. Gray means they're in the same order of magnitude and close. So the two that are concerning when we look at it this way are fipronil. Fipronil has really high toxicity. And one interesting thing about fipronil is that it's toxic at lower concentrations to fish than it is to invertebrates. So really not a good pesticide to put in creeks. And the other one is imidacloprid, which we've been studying for a while. So these are the two that we are most concerned about understanding their sources and how we might control them. So the big surprise this time, sorry, before we going back to ecotoxicity, the glyphosate results are well below the levels known to be toxic to vascular plants, invertebrates, fish, and humans. So at this point, I don't see that as a concern ecologically. It does mean that materials that our community is using as weed control are getting into the creeks, and that is concerning. But as far as an ecological impact, it's not jumping out. Okay, then we get to these results. We knew we had some bioassessment impacts potentially, and we were concerned about up at Rattlesnake Creek, but we did not think we were going to find imidacloprid or fipronil up there, and we did. And we have to ask how this is getting there. Two hypotheses are it's fipronil is in flea and tick collars and treatments. And I was just brushing my cat the other day and watching all these little hairs blow all over the place. I'm wondering if those are getting into the creeks up there. Or do we have wind-blown dust that's contaminated, just kind of getting everywhere? And that's another hypothesis. These were just a few samples. We're not going to answer those questions with what we've collected thus far. And then control, how can we control this? Well, we really can't control it till we know how it's getting there, but we have added to our outreach on neonics and fipronil. We've been, we have a new Inside Santa Barbara segment, and we've been meeting with different, with the pest control industry. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is just to show we continue our bird refuge monitoring. I'm not going to go into all of the details here. We continue to do storm monitoring there. We have year-round monitoring. We now have a lot of automated data, and so something that we're working on right now is getting a better system for the data management from these automated loggers. They collect data every 10 minutes. We have temperature, conductivity, pH, and then recently we just added chlorophyll, which is great. Chlorophyll gives a proxy for algal biomass. So we have a better, rather than inferring when we have an algal bloom by dissolved oxygen concentrations, we can now actually assess the amount of algal biomass in the bird refuge and in the beach lagoon. But we need a better system and more modern techniques for handling all this data, and we're working on that. Okay, and then this is a good time to point out, most of this work is being conducted by our watershed stewards. And last year, so during FY20, that was Taylor Pentinga and Kevin Nolan. And this year we have Ruby Baruth and Lilia Moyer. And I'm very appreciative, I know we all are, of the work that they are doing for the Creeks Division. Okay, next slide. Okay, same with the water quality improvement and restoration projects, just letting you know we continue to collect these samples. We probably need another year or two before we have enough samples to demonstrate effectiveness of any of these projects. We, in particular for the bioretention planters, we were collecting pesticides only on the inflow to the planters because we didn't expect to see any. Now that we know we're seeing pesticides on the inflow, we can sample the inflow and the outflow and see if if these planters are able to lower the pesticide levels. Okay, next slide. Permit monitoring, we continue to do that. It takes a chunk of our work. It's not too cumbersome at this point. We are letting them know all of the results of our weekly indicator bacteria sampling. We do a little bit of toxicity monitoring. We continue to demonstrate how much our LID projects reduce our load of pollutants getting into the creeks. And we're just maintaining the status quo on that until we get our the next permit, which appears to be a little bit delayed. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is one that I'll spend a little more time on. So this is a new topic of research for us, microplastics and trash. We are also partnering with Dr. Holden at UCSB, who we've already partnered with extensively on bacterial pollution. I wanted to move us into microplastics work, and it turns out she's the one at UCSB who's the expert in that so far. So that's wonderful. She has two graduate students, Timnit Kafella and Becca Reynolds, and they are wonderful. They're both working on microplastics. We just received funding yesterday that we got a small, we got a grant funded by the UCSB Associated Students Coastal Fund, and we have a small match with Measure B, and that will support primarily Becca Reynolds, who will spend a quarter dedicated to analyzing samples that we collect. We also, and I'll go into that a little bit more, we also have a pre-proposal submitted to a NOAA program on marine debris research, and that's for a much larger project, and we'll know soon if we are invited to submit a full proposal. Okay, next slide. So I won't go into all the details about this, but microplastics are small, less than 5 millimeters in size. Some of them come into the environment as microplastics, like some of those small beads that are in cosmetic products, and some are products of breakdown of larger plastics. They have been found in all marine environments, almost everywhere, every environment where they've been investigated, they've been found seemingly, and they can have harmful effects on aquatic organisms. And they've been found in the Santa Barbara Channel. Here's some pictures of them. You probably can't see the scale, but these are all taken from a microscope. And we know from a lot of work in the Bay Area that storm drains and streams are known to be a large source of microplastics to the marine environment. And in California, there's a new, a fairly new program, Assembly Bill 1422. After the microplastics were found in drinking water, the state very quickly moved on an effort to, I think by July 2021, there's supposed to be a testing and monitoring plan in place for California drinking water. So there's just a lot of movement and attention to this right now. Next slide. And so the title of the project that we have just gotten funding for is called Keeping Microplastics Out of Santa Barbara's Ocean. And so how do we keep them out of the ocean? We know we already use street sweeping and our curb inlet screens to keep large trash out of storm drains. And we know this works well. And we also know it keeps out a lot of leaf litter, which would lead to nutrient pollution, and they seem to be quite beneficial. But can they work? Can this system work to protect the creek and ocean from microplastics? How much microplastic even is there on our local streets? I don't know if you saw a recent article about the salmon in the Pacific Northwest. Coho salmon were dying during storm events, and they found it was a particular compound in crumbs from tire wear. And tire wear makes up a lot of microplastic. I can assume that we have a lot of tire wear in getting into storm drains here, but we need to test those assumptions. So we're going to sample, and this will be mostly Creeks Division, sample stormwater, catch basin debris. So what's inside those catch basins, street sweeper debris. So test what the street sweeper actually picks up, and the wash water that it uses along the way. And we'll see if there are are there microplastics being removed by the street sweeping, and how much is getting through into stormwater. This is a very exploratory scale of project. Then UCSB will analyze the samples with microscopy and chemical tests to confirm that they're plastic. And we're doing this really to protect water quality itself. We do not want to be sending microplastics down our storm drains if we can help it. And it's also within the context of the State Water Board's trash amendment. So the trash amendment really pushes communities to put these full capture devices inside catch basins. And that's a picture of one on the bottom there. It's kind of dark and hard to see. And that's kind of exactly what they're like in real life. They're hard to see. They're out of sight, out of mind. They get clogged easily. They require a lot of maintenance. And I don't think that they'll protect the ocean from microplastics. But again, that's something we need to explore quantitatively. And so I'm really excited about this next phase of research. Okay, next slide. Next steps are to complete the FY20 report and make it available on the website, carry out our current research plan, including the sampling for the microplastic project, and then come back to the CAC in June. And I think it would be great to have those students come as well. They are and discuss the microplastic project. We should have results by then, and they are very good at presenting. And with that, I will take any questions.
Penny, Betsy, has Anna joined us yet, Jennifer?
Yes, she is here.
Okay, Anna, welcome. Thank you. Anna, Penny, Betsy, any comments or questions? Jill? Hearing none. Jill, first of all, thank you so much, as always, very thorough. And I know I speak for the committee to express appreciation for you going into some detail about microplastics. I suspect when you use that term, we all had a different vision of what that might be. So you clarified it. And that's really, I feel, very good that we are being assertive and progressive in that regard. I did have a question, and it's actually tied. We had a written public comment that will go into the public comment record that had to do with the increase from a community member, increase in human feces and trash in one of the creeks. So the report mentions that, but how do we address and due to the increase in trash being produced and human waste being produced through perhaps encampments, the growth in encampments, how are we addressing that underwater quality, the biological and just the large debris and so on?
Well, I mean, we're addressing it by removing it as much as we can. And Cameron can speak more about this, but we are out there weekly. We are posting camps. We were not able to post encampments for a while. because
Right.
of the pandemic,
Right.
and that has changed recently. So they're now being posted if they pose a potential water quality hazard, which, you know, encampments along a creek bank are going to have human waste associated with them. That is shown visually. We don't have any specific testing set up. We don't have
Okay.
we won't be doing any human marker testing during the next storm because we don't have that in place with UCSB. Like that would have had to
I
have
see.
been planned research.
That was my question. Yes.
There,
If we're going to be doing any of that.
There's recently a large study released about encampments in San Diego, and they were incredibly thorough. San Diego River Contamination Study, and they went out and actually created simulated runoff around fecal material and sampled the runoff that came off near that. You know, it's something we all would have known anyways. Of course, you're going to get some human markers coming off of human waste, but then they showed that the soil around those sites could be contaminated as well.
Okay, I hear, oh, yeah, please.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to respond, and I want to thank you for bringing up the public comment email we received
Yes.
regarding trash at Montecito Street in Mission Creek. And Creeks Division staff, Chris Clark, has had an opportunity to communicate back with the member of the public that sent that email. But I would like to, since we're talking about water quality and trash and human waste being in the
Right.
creek is obviously part of that. I'd like to just remind the committee about some of the things we do. That particular location is a hotspot for us for trash. There's the trash can nearby on Montecito Street at Mission Creek, and somebody has been going and actually dumping that trash can into the creek. And so we're working on different ways to stop that. And one of those is just relocating the trash can to a place that makes it more difficult to do that, or locking the lid of the trash can or something so that doesn't happen. But we do have a crew that is out picking up trash in the creeks several times a week. And in that location, we're there at least once a week, but often multiple times during the course of a week to remove all of that trash as soon as it gets in there. The Creeks Division does spend somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000 a year just on doing trash pickup in the city. The volume is it's really unbelievable. We pick up over 50 tons of trash out of the creeks every year. And that happens year after year, but we're out there on a regular basis, and we do appreciate the people letting us know when they see that in the creek. So we've thanked that member of the public for letting us know about that, and encouraged her and everyone else to let us know when they see trash in the creek, and we will get out there and get it cleaned up.
Cameron, thank you so much. That's precisely why I brought this up. And just for the public's knowledge, this particular public member did speak specifically to feces, needles, and trash. So when you say trash, I'm assuming it's the bigger, it's feces, needles, whatever they find is considered trash, and we pick it up. So thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay. Jill, thank you.
You're welcome.
Always
Thank you.
interesting. Yes, thank you very much.
Have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you. And we're on to our next item. For this one, there was no action. We received the presentation. And our next one is an action item, Andre Clark Bird Refuge Restoration Project. And I will turn it over to Cameron to introduce George.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. This is a project that has been presented to the committee several times, the Andre Clark Bird Refuge Restoration Project. George Johnson is our creek supervisor. He's the project manager for the project. And we're here tonight to remind you about and the public about what the scope of the project is, but also to talk about the environmental review document. We have a mitigated negative declaration that has been prepared under the California Environmental Quality Act. And that document is going to the city's planning commission tomorrow for their review and certification. And so Mr. Johnson will provide a presentation to the committee, and then we'll be asking for the committee to provide comments and then and answer any questions you may have, and then ultimately a recommendation to the planning commission regarding the environmental document. So with that, I'll turn it over to George Johnson, our creek supervisor.
Okay, hello everyone. I can't see on my screen the PowerPoint. Is that up yet? Oh, there we go. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Andrea Clark Bird Refuge. Hello everyone. So next slide, please. Can everybody hear me okay? If not, let me know. We'll cover the historic conditions. You can see in this photo, I don't have a cursor to move around, but in the lower portion on the other side of what most of you can see is Cabrillo. Most of you know the zoo is that hilly looking area behind Cabrillo. But anyway, there's water on the front, on the beach side of Cabrillo. And that is the historic connection to Sycamore Creek. There used to be a large lagoon on that side, right where the volleyball courts are now at East Beach, if you are familiar with that. The bird refuge was more of a salt flat then. It had some water in it periodically throughout the year, but it was very, very shallow, and a lot of times it would dry out. And it also had dune habitat. You can see that vegetation on the beach. Next slide, please. There were some modifications made in the late 1920s to turn the bird refuge into what's called a bird refuge by making it open water habitat. And they did that by dredging the salt marsh. And then there's a red marker on the map. That's right where they constructed a weir or a dam to pool the water behind it to make a deeper open water type of feature, more like a lake, shallow lake, as opposed to a drier salt flat. They also disconnected Sycamore Creek from the bird refuge. Next slide, please. And you can see in this slide that the Sycamore Creek now goes straight out to the ocean, and the bird refuge doesn't have a lagoon really on the beach very much. And it's been dredged. That's what the yellow marking indicates. Next slide. This shows the two pictures side by side. The left is the salt flat. That's the historic condition. And then this is what we know of the bird refuge now with the 3 islands. Those islands were made from the dredge spoils. And it's, again, disconnected from Sycamore Creek. Next slide. Other way, I think. Yeah, there we go. Right now, the bird refuge is, although it was dredged, it's still pretty shallow, and parts of it have filled in since then because that's almost 100 years ago now. It's about 2 to 5 feet deep throughout. It has very limited flushing. Part of the water quality problem is the high nutrients, which create low dissolved oxygen, and then that creates blooms of different organisms that can create odors. It also marginalizes this poor water quality, both the bird and the aquatic habitat. And so our goal is to try to improve some of that with this restoration project. Next slide. Again, our goal is improve bird and aquatic habitat, improve water quality like clarity, DO, nutrients, and then adapt to sea level rise. Next slide. We have 5 major components in the restoration project. One is a constructed treatment wetland. Another is to replace the weir and the weir gate. Again, that's the dam at the mountainside of Cabrillo Boulevard. Restore dunes on the ocean side of Cabrillo and salt marsh habitat, and then We also want to manage the beach berm and the lagoon outlet to create more frequent flushing of the bird refuge during rain events, and then restore 5 acres around the perimeter of the lagoon, including on the islands. Next slide. Here's a site plan that kind of goes over the various components. The constructed wetland or retention basin is up in the far left-hand corner. It's actually over on the other side of the freeway at the tennis courts, where the main drain that goes into the bird refuge flows through that site. And then we also have the different coloring around the lagoon, and the lake is various restoration, planting, and removal of non-natives. And then the weir gate is identified there in the lower left-hand corner, as well as the dune restoration. And then it points to where we'll be doing the seasonal burn management, which is way down in the bottom left-hand corner. Next slide, please. Here's a photo of the treatment wetland. You can see a little channel there with water in it. That channel, we're going to divert the low flow water out of that channel and put it into a retention basin that's going to be excavated 3 or 4 feet down in that open area you can see in the photo between the channel and the tennis courts. And that will treat water, low flow water. We will allow vegetation to grow in it, like bulrush. And then we will remove that bulrush, and that'll help to remove nutrients out of the system. Those plants will uptake the nutrients, and then we remove those plants periodically. They'll grow back, take up more nutrients. So over time, we hope to reduce, especially during low flows, the amount of nutrients entering the bird refuge. Next slide. Here's the weir I was talking about, or the dam. The water has to, in order for the bird refuge to drain, the water has to get up all the way to that opening there, the gap in the concrete, before it will spill. And then it will fill the beachside lagoon, and then that has to fill up even higher before it will go over the beach berm. And we're going to replace that weir. The important thing to note here is we're going to be putting in 2 gates that will go all the way to the bottom elevation of the water in the bird refuge. And that will really help to drain some of what, I don't know what the technical term is, but there's a lot of nutrients, a big fluffy layer of nutrients at the bottom of the bird refuge. And currently, if the bird refuge does spill, and it only spills during very large rain events, in fact, during the drought, I don't think it's spilled for 4 or 5 years, but the last few years it's done it once or twice during large rain events, it has to overtop that gap there. So it never flushes that layer of kind of just rotting vegetation in the bottom of the bird refuge. So we hope with these gates that we'll be able to flush some of that material out and then keep it relatively free of that by more frequent breaching and more frequent flushing during rain events. Next slide, please. So dune and salt marsh habitat, this is just a picture of the beach. You can see this area on the right. It's not used much by the public. It's just kind of an open field there. We're going to turn that, we're going to widen the beachside lagoon some and turn that into some low dune habitat, as well as additional salt marsh. Next slide. And then berm management, the last thing we'll talk about here is you can look out on the beach and you see that high sand berm in front of the mouth of the lagoon there. We're going to lower that to a prescribed height, and then we're going to work with Coastal Commission on what that optimum height is, but we'll be lowering that to a height to allow the water to spill over during rain events. We won't excavate it lower than the water, but just maybe a foot above it, we're thinking, and then when it rains, it will fill and then slowly spill over the top, and that will allow the bird refuge to drain on smaller rain events. As I said, right now, it takes a very large rain event to do that. This will also help with flooding on Cabrillo during the large rain events to have it spill a little earlier. Next slide, please. And here you can see what it looks like when it is open. You can see all the water draining out of the bird refuge. Next slide. The transition zones are just the areas around the bird refuge and on the islands. You can see the island it blends in a little bit, but it's in the background there a bit. And then on the sides, we'll be removing areas of non-native vegetation, replacing them with native vegetation. We'll be making some habitat lobes, next slide, which is just some shallow wetland areas. You can see that on the plans, the hashed areas. That's going to just be wetland, but it won't be covered in water. It will be just close to the surface of the water, and we'll have salt marsh type plants growing there. Next slide, please. And then here on these transition zones, again, you can see that big area of lawn. Well, we will be keeping some lawn adjacent to the bike path because people like to walk and run there. But in areas where there's wide areas like this, we'll be replacing it with native vegetation. A little better habitat for the birds. Next slide, please. So we want to go over the project history itself. There's been odor problems in the bird refuge since like 1933. We have some record of the Parks and Recreation Commission discussing it. So it's been almost 100 years that there's been these problems in the bird refuge. The Creeks Division began monitoring in 2008 to see, what's going on in the bird refuge. We also, later on, we tried some microbial augmentation and aeration to try to improve water quality, and we did a lot of sampling to find out if it helped, and we didn't really see much improvement there. So then we looked at there was an old idea in the 80s that had been studied quite a bit to dredge the bird refuge deeper to allow more aeration, mechanical aeration of the bird refuge to improve dissolved oxygen. It's very expensive to dredge. We looked at the feasibility of dumping the material on the beach like they do for dredging at the harbor, but that is not feasible because it was too fine grained. So that was out. So we had to go to some different options. We looked at all kinds of different options and with some conceptual designs. And then we selected through a public review process and through just our own research an option that we could try to do to help with the water quality in the bird refuge, and that's the design option you're seeing today. And that was selected in 2018, and the final project design we began in late 2018. Next slide. So here's some of the public outreach we did. We did have a lot of meetings. This is our third meeting of the Creeks Advisory Committee. We went to Parks and Recreation Commission and and City Council a number of times. We also had a large general community meeting. We've worked with stakeholders, the surrounding neighbors. City Council. Hello? Oh, sorry. I heard something. We had with surrounding landowners. We also worked with the environmental organizations, the other city departments, and the permitting agencies. We received broad support for the project from everyone. Everybody would like to see the conditions improved in the bird refuge. And so there was a lot of, we especially want to thank Santa Barbara Audubon. They provided a lot of input on the bird aspect and the users of the bird refuge and how best we can interface with that community so that we make sure to preserve the parts of it that they like, and that we make improvements that will help the birds and not harm them. So that was, we did a couple years of this public outreach, and through that process, next slide, we decided on what option we would go forward with. We're now at the stage of doing environmental review on the project, the proposed project. City of Santa Barbara's Planning Division performed the environmental review. They prepared a mitigated negative declaration, or an MND. Thankfully, the environmental review concluded there's no significant impacts as a result of the project. There were potentially significant impacts to biological resources and water quality. And we, through mitigation measures, are able to reduce that to less than significant. And next slide, please. And we'll go over some of those mitigations later. The MND recently closed the public comment. That was a 30-day public comment period. It started on October 30th and ended on November 29th. We only received one public comment from the Air Pollution Control District about odors during construction, to try to minimize those when we're digging in the mud areas, because they can sometimes create odors. Next slide, please. So here's the mitigation measures, or in general discussion of some of those. There was actually 37 different mitigation measures to reduce those short-term impacts to biological resources and water quality from the construction. They included a lot of surveys for birds, rare plants, beetles, tidewater goby, monitoring during construction for species like legless lizard and southwestern pond turtle, as well as a bunch of BMPs for erosion control and fencing and trees. So a lot of different measures to protect the sensitive resources out there during the construction of the project. Next slide, please. In particular, protection of the tidewater goby was important because this is an endangered species that does live in the bird refuge in the lake and the lagoon. And so we have to, any area that we're doing any work within the wetted area where the gobies could be, we have to isolate that area and then go in and use seine nets to capture any gobies and remove them outside of the work area. And then keep that area isolated during construction. And then once we're finished, we have to carefully remove the barriers so that the gobies can enter back that work area. Next slide, please. We have voluntary post-construction or voluntary mitigation measures that we did, not all post-project, but water quality sampling in the lake and lagoon. We're going to continue to do that to see how the project actually improves that water quality, as well as post-construction bird surveys to see if we get a different suite or more varieties or more nesting birds in the bird refuge as a result of the restoration. And then we're implementing a pretty extensive dewatering erosion control plan during construction that I just described to help with the gobies, but also to make sure we don't pollute the water during construction. Next slide. So project approvals, we're here tonight to get your recommendation to carry forward to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission tomorrow on the 17th, we're going to have a hearing, and if they are scheduled to adopt the environmental document and approve the project, but we'll have to wait and see if they do tomorrow. If that is successful at the Planning Commission, we will go to the Coastal Commission for approval for a consolidated coastal development permit, and then we'll have to get all the other federal and state permits to work in these areas with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Army Corps of Engineers, and the various other agencies involved. Next slide, please. So our timeline to get all this done is to try to have final design plans completed in this May or May of 2021. Then we want to get the permitting, the Coastal Commission approval, as well as project bidding completed in June of 2021. Construction would start in August, and then we hope to complete construction in December of 2021. Next slide. The budget is $2 million. We have $1,864,000 in the budget right now. We have scheduled another $300,000 to go in the budget in FY22. So we should have enough to cover construction. Next slide. And so what we're here today to ask the committee to take action on is that the committee provide a recommendation to the Planning Commission to A, adopt the mitigated negative declaration, and B, provide a recommendation to allow the project to proceed to the California Coastal Commission for a consolidated coastal development permit for the proposed development that is located in both the appealables jurisdiction of the city coastal zone and the California Coastal Commission permit jurisdiction. I know that's a mouthful, but that's all the technical jargon that needs to be approved or recommended by the Planning Commission in order to move the project forward for Coastal Commission approval. So that concludes my presentation. Next slide, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
So I turn to the committee. Any questions of George? And George, thank you so much for again walking us through the project. Appreciate that very much.
Lori, if I can
Question-
just interject,
Please.
we had a question from an attendee, George. He asked what year the initial photo was taken, if you know that.
Initial photo? Oh, you mean when it was a salt marsh? I don't really know. I know it was pre-1928, but I don't know exactly. Sorry, I don't. I know what you're referring to, that one. I actually got that photo from our previous mayor, had it in her office, and that's a photo of a photo. So I don't know the actual date. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Other questions or, will this presentation be uploaded to the website of this project? And this is a great presentation. Is that possible?
It can be, but we have not loaded that. I don't think at this point, but if you guys would like to see it there for information, I'm sure that's not a problem. I don't know how all the downloading stuff works, but I think we could do that.
That'd be great, or even in a PDF mode.
I was just going to say, I can go ahead and save it as a PDF and put it with the rest of the information from this month's meeting.
Oh,
Okay,
that would be
great.
fabulous. That'd be great. Thank you so much. Other questions or comments? And any questions from any attendees, the public? I don't have any capacity to see if there's any hand raised, so I'll rely on Jennifer.
I don't see any hands raised or
Okay.
any additional questions.
Okay. George, just to let you know, Audubon is very appreciative, and to Cameron, Audubon is very appreciative of how you have worked with us throughout this project. And we spent many hours. Okay, I'm getting a text that a public member, I sent a comment on raise your hand. Okay, so I'm going to pause, and I don't have that capability of seeing that.
I see one question.
Okay.
That was the initial photo year, but I don't see a
Oh.
second.
Okay.
But I don't know if Jen does. She might have more capability than me.
It looks like in the questions section, there's a comment that says, George thinks many of these actions are quite positive and we endorse most, if not all of those. I like the effort to acquire outside funding because this is the way to overcome a persistent problem whereby insufficient funds have been delegated to get at fundamental issues at the bird refuge. Also, I have concern about protection of birds during the breeding period. I notice a contradiction between laying required by CDFW and that in your MND. Specifically and first, the bird breeding season, January or February through August, should be avoided. So why was that not recommended here? Second, the MND states that pre-project surveys will be conducted to a distance of 1,000 feet from construction sites and
100 feet,
Yes,
100.
and nests would be avoided at the same distance until the chicks had fledged. This differs from CDFW prescriptions that call for distances of 300 feet for passerines or songbirds and 500 feet for raptors until the nestlings have fledged and the nest is no longer being used.
So that was submitted by a public member, Mark Holmgren, and I got a copy of it as well. Looks like there's two issues. First, quite laudatory, and he's speaking on behalf of Santa Barbara Audubon Society, I believe. But one issue is there was no mention in the mitigated negative declaration about trying to avoid construction during the bird breeding season. And then the second is the distance. If you have to do construction, the distance that is stipulated in the MND is 100 feet when CDFW states 300 to 500, depending upon whether it's passerines or raptors.
Yes, so for the first part of the the comment from Mark, we did apply for a lot of outside grants. Actually, I think 3 or 4, but we were not successful with any of those, unfortunately. So we did try to get some additional funding, but for this particular project, there's been a lot of competition lately for our grants, and so it just didn't rise to the level of some of the other projects. At least that's what we were told in the review process. And then in terms of the bird nesting season, first off, I thought the MND did restrict work until August, but I'm not totally sure about that. What I do know is that's when we are scheduled to start. And the reason that the pre-surveys are in there is August, as you know, is pretty much the end of the nesting season. So we figure we hope there won't be a lot so that we can proceed with construction. We also have rain windows on the back side. We actually, even going into December, descends into those rain windows. We have restrictions on Tidewater Gobies. I don't think we can start the construction until August for Tidewater Gobies either, and I think that is part of the MND. So we're kind of juggling a lot of species and restrictions and still trying to get the project done in a reasonable time frame before it rains and after the birds nest, and so we don't disturb the gobies. So there's kind of a lot going on there. As far as our plans is to start in August and do the pre-surveys, and if we have a nest, 100 feet, you're right, is for I think smaller birds. Maybe it's 300 now in the Fish and Wildlife permit, but we will follow whatever is the most restrictive of our permit conditions, because we don't want to harm any birds, and we'll defer to our biologist to tell us what he thinks is appropriate. If he says, hey, let's not work in this area, then that's what we're do. We're not trying to go out there and harm anything, and we're going to defer to those pre-construction surveys to give us direction as to how to handle work. There are a lot of work sites, as you noticed, around the bird refuge. So my hope is that if we do find some nesting birds or something sensitive in one area, we can direct the contractor to work in another area where we don't have those issues. And that is an advantage because we do have this large work area. So I think that's the best we can do, but we will follow whatever is the most restricted in our permit conditions.
Thank you. And that's very refreshing to hear and affirming. Okay, any other comments, Anna, Betsy, Penny? I just want to say, I don't know if you follow, but there was several rare species recently at Andre Clark, including swamp sparrow, and hopefully you had a chance to see that, but some other things as well. So, all right. Is there a motion? I will read it for the record, that the committee, well, we received the presentation, and we are, is there a motion to provide a recommendation to the Planning Commission to, 1, adopt the mitigated negative declaration, and 2, provide a recommendation to allow the project to proceed to the California Coastal Commission for a consolidated coastal development permit for the proposed development that is located in both the appealable jurisdiction of the city's coastal zone and the California Coastal Commission permit jurisdiction. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Was that Penny or Betsy?
Sorry, I'm trying. There we go. That's
There we
Betsy.
go. Thank you, Betsy. And is there a second? Always a little awkward virtually.
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Penny. Thanks very much. So it's been moved by Betsy, seconded by Penny. Is there any further discussion by the committee? All those in favor, please note verbally by unmuting.
I'll go ahead and call each member
Okay.
individually to take the vote.
Thank you.
So Chair Gaskin,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Ms. Owens,
Aye.
Ms. Rizzo Centino?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, well done. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
And I believe that is the end of action and business. So,
Yeah,
Cameron?
thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just offering a reminder about the
Oh,
minute now that we have a
thank
quorum present.
you. Yes, yes, thank you very much. We need action on our, let's see, our November minutes from 2020. So is there a motion to, we have one person who wasn't at that meeting. So is there a motion to approve the minutes from our November 2020 meeting?
I move to approve.
Thank you,
Actually,
Anna.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just to clarify, those are from the October 21st, 2020 meeting.
Thank you. October
It's okay.
21st, 2020. Thank you. Anna, if you're okay, I'll just use your move to go to that date. And is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Penny. And all those in favor?
I'll go ahead and do
Okay, a roll call.
a roll for that. So we have Chair Gaskin,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
I'll abstain.
Ms. Owens,
Aye.
Ms. Rizzo Centino.
Aye.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for reminding me, Cameron. So unless I've forgotten anything else, I think we are adjourned.
The last thing I wanted to say is just that the next meeting will be the third Wednesday of January. It's January 20th, 2021. And I wanted to thank you all again for your time and thoughtful consideration of all the items throughout the year, and for your patience this year dealing with all the changes with our virtual meetings. And I wish you all happy holidays. Thank you.
And likewise to the entire staff. Thank you all very much.
Happy holidays,
care.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you to Jen for the snacks.
Yeah.
Aw, happy holidays. Happy
holidays.
holidays. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.